Greetings, Star Wars fans, whether you're a Dengar guy or a Boss guy. Me, I'm an IG-88 guy. This is John Edward Lee here with another episode of Universe Expanding Books and Toys from a secret location hidden in the Outer Rim. We are here to talk about a lot of things, but mostly we're going to be talking about the Clone Wars multimedia event that occurred during the release between the release of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. It was not a huge week as far as new stuff, as far as collecting goes. I have Crosshair and Hunter and Asajj Ventress Black Series, as well as the Mandalorian helmet coming to me, but they're sort of stuck in FedEx limbo. So we're going to go right ahead without them, and maybe they'll be a focus next week. Now, I like to pick a t-shirt for what I'm going to talk about, and much to my chagrin, I realized that of the 50 plus Star Wars shirts I have, they are almost all either extended universe or movie related to the original trilogy. I don't have any Clone Wars shirts. In fact, the only Clone Wars shirt I have is Ahsoka, but we're talking about Clone Wars before that CGI show, so she doesn't really count for that. I went with Mara Jade, a character that I hope will eventually make her way back into canon, as she's one of my favorites, and of course created by Timothy Zahn, along with Thrawn and Talon Karrde. But like I said, we're here to talk about the Clone Wars. The only things I collected as far as toys goes this week were a couple of older things. The things I got was Yoda from the Tartakovsky animated series, and I also got from the realistic line of Clone Wars, Asajj Ventress and Dirge. Both two of my favorite characters. This line was a line that did not look like the cartoon series, but looked more realistic, so that you could put them with your movie characters and have a more concise universe. But that leads me into what I want to talk about, and like I said, it's that multimedia event where they made books, comic books, video games, did a lot of articles in Star Wars Insiders about the Clone Wars. See, the Clone Wars didn't really exist in the films at all. It starts at the end of Attack of the Clones and finishes at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. So what Lucasfilm, LucasArts, and Lucas Books did was decide, we're going to have a bunch of writers do a bunch of stuff. We're going to create this 3-year war outside of the movies. It's just similar to Shadows of the Empire, which was almost like a Star Wars movie that took place outside of being a movie. They didn't know they were going to make that CGI show, and of course the CGI show was amazing. So they were trying to fill in the gaps way before that. In fact, when the CGI movie came out, I was like, oh, cool, the Clone Wars movie. Oh, they're going to make a show? Cool, that'll be one nice little season to fit in. No, we got 7 seasons. So the huge amount of Clone Wars stories is well beyond the 3-year war. But that's okay. It's a very exciting era with a bunch of very exciting villains. So going right into the history, one of the first things that they did before they even started that is the Star Wars Republic comic book, which was originally just called Star Wars. This takes place, the whole series takes place between the release of, or in chronological order, after the events of Phantom Menace to right after the events of Revenge of the Sith. And it was a lengthy series. The entire series is that long. I have 6 volumes of it. And before anyone asks what these are, these boxes that I'm showing, these are called comic store folios. They're really great. They hold about 15 comics in the back boards, which of course I have to have them that way, or they can fit 20 without. And they're so well protecting that you don't really need that, but I just don't want the comics rubbing up against each other and having the ink rub off on each other. So, despite that was a long series, only about half of it is really the Clone Wars, but it was a really good series. And I'd mentioned Asajj and Dirge right off the bat because I got those figures. They were a huge part of that. This is their very first appearance, Republic number 52. This series is amazing. It's arguably the most brutal series Clone Wars had. Much more brutal than either the cartoon series or any, well, the books are pretty brutal too, but this, because you saw what was going on, was very, very crazy. So we had that issue with the new face of war, Asajj and Dirge, as they were being introduced. And of course, I went through the whole war. There's Anakin going nuts on some battle droids, and one of the craziest things that happened in issue 58. Asajj Ventress captures Obi-Wan and captures him for a long time and actually imprisons him and puts him in this iron mask, leaving everyone to think that he is dead, including Anakin, who sort of goes a little darker because of it. Now, the series went on to have a lot of cool issues, excuse me, like the origin of Asajj Ventress. And of course, Anakin gets a little bit darker, like I said. But that went through for a while, so very good series. Now, that didn't just stop just there. One of the things that they did as well is make a bunch of books. These are the Clone Wars books. So a lot of reading material, a lot of stories went into that. On top of all that, they also had the Tartakovsky animated series, which was an amazing series. Genndy Tartakovsky is the creator of Samurai Jack, an animator, designer for Dexter's Lab. He directed the A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie, Hotel Transylvania. That's also him. He's a very talented guy, so it was very cool that he got to do a little bit of the Clone Wars. In fact, it's arguably not the best, because that CGI is so good, but it's just as good, even though it was 3 short seasons. It had a comic book presence. They had these digest books, which are very cool. There was 10 volumes, including some characters that never even made it into the actual show, like Quinlan Voss right there. See, that Republic show, it focused originally on characters like Kai Alimundi, Quinlan Voss, Aura Singh, characters that you didn't really see much in the movies that they wanted to expand on. But when they got to the Clone Wars, they really had to focus on Anakin and the Jedi, because that's really what it's all about, and the clones themselves. So that's where that went. Now, of course, the animated series, like you saw the Yoda, also had a presence for Dirge and Asajj. I've had these figures forever because, of course, I like villains a lot. Now, that wasn't it as far as the comic books goes. There was a series of one-shots for different Jedi. Ayla, Mace, Shakti, Dooku, who was once a Jedi, and Yoda, who was once his master when Dooku was a Padawan. A lot of people don't realize that. Now, you've seen that there's a realistic line and there's the Tartakovsky line. Now, the one I don't have is the Yoda realistic one. I just have the animated one. However, later on, they did another one with Yoda in his battle gear on his Kaibuck, which starts off the Tartakovsky animated series. I believe that's the first scene, is him riding across the battle on that thing with his hood up. Very cool. They also did a series of General Grievous comics. And to finish it all up, to sort of wrap everything up, to lead up to the movie, there was also the Obsession series, which each issue focused on a major character villain from that series. Ending, of course, beginning and ending with Asajj Ventress. Now, that was pretty much it as far as what they brought out, except for that they did bring 2 video games. Unfortunately, I don't have a physical copy to show you because all my video games are digital. They're just on my computer. One day I need to go back and get physical copies. But there was Republic Commando, which followed Delta Squad, and they made a series of books out of that. And there was also a game just called Clone Wars that actually came with versions of the Xbox that you got, which is very cool, which is more like vehicle battles and stuff like that. Very cool game. Well, I like Republic Commando is actually one of my favorite Star Wars games ever. It came out like 4 months after Halo 2, and in my opinion, it blew it away. The only thing that really came out this week as far as Star Wars stuff was one comic book, just one. And that was The War of the Bounty Hunters #1. And of course, this is a 34-issue series crossing over to everything, but this is the actual Bounty Hunter Wars issue that's just called Bounty Hunter Wars. So, #1 of that. Now, One of the cool things they're doing this month, and before I even get into it, I hate variant covers. I don't like them. I think it's kind of a scam to get you to buy multiple copies of the same issue. Now, there are tons of people who don't care about that. They love it. Awesome. But for me, when I'm trying to get a copy of every issue, I don't want to track down multiple copies that have the exact same pages in it just because the art's different. I would rather buy a book that has all those covers in it, which I do have some stuff like that. Now, but this month, because it's Pride Month, I'm definitely getting the variant covers. They're very cool, and of course represent different LGBTQ characters throughout Star Wars, of which there are many at this point. The very first one is that War of the Bounty Hunters, but it is featuring Dr. Aphra, one of my favorite characters. So very rarely do I have two copies of the same issues with a variant issue, but Dr. Aphra, Boba Fett, two of my favorite characters of all times. Well, it looks like we've traveled through the old Clone Wars, the EU version of the Clone Wars, and of course the CGI one came out right as the Disney acquisition happened, and they had decided, once they decided what they were going to do with the next films, that the Clone Wars CG would continue to be connected to the canon. Everything before it got tossed as far as continuity goes, but that doesn't mean for a second that they're not awesome, awesome stories. One of my favorite books is Shatterpoint, which is basically it's Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now with Mace Windu. He goes to his home planet to track down a Jedi who has become a warlord. Very cool, very bleak, very dark book. But if you love Mace Windu, and you love, Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness, that's a very good book to get into. Well, that's about wraps it up for me this evening. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, next week, I think we're probably going to talk about Mandalorian Bad Batch. Oh, you know what? I have something else I needed to show you. Rarely do I get vintage figures. And I got a couple this week. I now have 56 of the original 100-ish figures, so I'm a little over halfway through collecting them all, which I do slowly. I did get this week Bespin Luke. Look at him right there in his nice boring outfit. I think of all the Lukes, this is the most boring outfit, but because that battle and Empire Strikes Back is my favorite, it's nice to see him. Also from Empire Strikes Back, and my favorite type of figure to collect is the droid, and I love droids, 21B, the medical droid. I've rarely seen this figure in real life. I'm very impressed with the clear see-through. That's really nothing. That's not that hard to do, but for an action figure, it really has like a nice effect to it. And of course, that's what he looked like in the movies. I cannot forget that I got a couple nice vintage figures that are going to go into my collection. We'll always look for more, and most than anything else, I've got 3 Ewoks out of the 8 to go. So, and of course, they're the most expensive, hardest ones to find. So let's see how we go on that. Again, this is John Edward Lee. This is Universe Expanding Books and Toys, and I thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back next week with something new. In the meantime, remember that the Force will be with you always.